Good afternoon. Welcome to the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call.
Yeah, so Director Sasana?
Present.
Director Gibson?
Here.
Director Reinecke?
Here.
Chair Zimmer?
Here.
All right, all parties present.
Move to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go to item 4, Jamie, how many people do we have online? Nine people. Okay, thank you. Board member comments, item 4. Oh.
Good.
Okay. Hearing none. We'll move to item 5, special presentations. We have none. Item 6, the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda. We have the 2025 financial report and approval of the minutes from April 16th. Do we want to talk about that? Any questions on or pull it? Any comments?
By me.
I did have one comment. Maybe we need to pull it to make comments on it, or should we go to public? Okay. There was a line item on the second page of the report, the financial report. And it talks about our reserve, our $70,000 reserve that we added in last time, and there's an expenditure for $38,000 under that. And I wasn't clear on where that $38,000 came from.
Oh, is out of the rollover funds?
Yeah, so it should be
Yeah,
that
yeah.
though.
Yeah, I think that is just an error that
Okay.
that value got dragged down one cell further than it should have. So
Okay.
yeah, that it's the same number as the number in the cell above, just with a couple extra decimal points. But yeah, that's a great catch and
All right.
something we'll fix.
Okay, sounds good. I have no other comments. Okay, we'll go to public comment.
For items not on the agenda, or no, sorry, public comment
Okay.
for consent. Yep, you're right.
Yes.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. There are no public comments in the boardroom or online.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move approval of consent. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. We'll move to item 7, public comments for items not appearing on the agenda.
If you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take public comment in the boardroom first.
Good afternoon, Patrick McGivney, the Sustainability Group. We had 6 appeals before the Coastal Commission last week. During these appeals,
Ron, the microphone is not on.
Can we start over? Thank you. Patrick McGibney, the Sustainability Group. We had 6 appeals before the Coastal Commission last week. During those appeals, coastal staff kept telling the commission that the county was confident based on, and I quote, as articulated by the BMC, end of quote, that the Los Osos water basin is now not just trending towards sustainability, but has reached sustainability for the long term. This is all found in their staff reports. When did the BMC articulate this, and what factual data was used? If this is something you never actually said or implied, maybe you should tell that to the county and the Coastal Commission. Is the county now speaking on behalf of the BMC? If so, that should be a concern. In an addendum sent to the Coastal Commission by Mr. Reilly, the Sustainable Water Czar for this basin, he explained that the reason for the recent uptick in chloride levels wasn't due to seawater intrusion, but high rates of production. Data shows, he says, the higher the production rate, the higher the chloride readings. And conversely, the lower the production rate, the lower the chloride readings. Put another way, the more you pump, the more seawater intrusion. The less you pump, the less seawater intrusion. Makes perfect sense. High chloride readings are a primary indicator of seawater intrusion. The most recent basin report showed overall chloride levels have reached 249 milligrams per liter. Nitrates were measured at 15.7. It also showed water levels are only at 4.1 feet. Whereas in the basin plan, it says on page 325, and I quote, if the basin plan programs are implemented as described, it is expected that water level metric would reach its target of 8 feet by 2022. That was 3 years ago. Where are the programs, or were the programs not being implemented correctly? Why are we only at half that target? 3 of the 4 primary targets for sustainability not only remain unmet, but have gotten worse. Nitrate levels, chloride levels, and water levels. Those 3 are actually measured metrics with data supporting those metrics. The one data point that has met its target is the one that is not measured but calculated based on estimates, the basin yield metric, which is what the county is now using to claim we have a sustainable basin. Long-term sustainability is now being inferred based on an estimated production rate with over 40% extraction still unmetered and an estimated sustainable yield, and 1 year of above average rainfall we had several years ago. Is this how basin management works? Thank you.
My name's Bob Sarbian. I just had a question. I was wondering how the unmetered accounts get charged. I mean, do they get a bill on their property tax like the rest of us? How do you charge unmetered accounts? That's just a question. Thank you.
Becky McFarland, Los Osos. As ever, I'll bring up basin metrics. As Patrick said, we're not meeting them. And it's so disconcerting to hear our coastal commission, to hear our water czar, or whoever's saying that our basin is sustainable. It's clearly not. It's in black and white in every report we've had. It's just not. We can keep telling ourselves it's going to happen. We can keep telling ourselves the 200 acre feet of water we might get from this pipeline is going to save us. We can keep telling ourselves we can add an unlimited number of guest houses to our town with no effect on our water. Those buildings do not have to do Title 19 retrofit. Why are we, I ask myself all the time, why? Why? Other than I know we're supposed to meet housing things here, but why? It's just untrue. It's not sustainable. And, you know, the basin plan was put there and it says for the existing residents, it's not sustainable for us. So what are we doing? I've said again and again, I'm not against people getting to build on their lots they've had forever. But why are we not telling the truth that our basin is not sustainable? People are moving in here and going, wow, I didn't even hear about the water situation. Now they're hearing about the fire situation. But we need to be realistic and honest with new people in town and with the people that are here. So let's hear the truth. Thank you.
There's no more public comment in the boardroom, and it looks like there's no public comment online.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I can respond quickly to Mr. Sarvy's question that the unmetered extractors of this basin are not being charged directly. The funds, they would fall under the area that the county represents, as at least as far as land use. The adjudication kept them out of the adjudication. And to the extent that they are members of the public that are, they're not served by the county, but let's say the county is their main representative. County General Fund has been paying the cost of administering the program to date. It's been on our list for a long time to talk about some measure that would allocate funds differently, perhaps a direct assessment, but that hasn't been acted on yet. Thank you.
Okay.
I have just a question, I guess, a comment about Mr. McGivney's comments. Unfortunately, I'm troubled by a lot of the things that he brought up too. But 6 appeals, I'm just wondering where 6 appeals came from, what they were about. Have there been that many applications processed? What sorts of, I guess I'm curious about that.
Well, there are a variety of them. There are various land use permits that have been processed, even in fact, under the old local coastal program before we got into this one. House constructions outside the prohibition zone and the part that the LCP now it takes over. The appeals were were put forward by Mr. McGivney in large part, and the sustainability group's name is also on that, asserting an insufficient water supply. The Coastal Commission has looked over the materials about the water supply and concluded with the 2-to-1 retrofit requirement, retrofit to build requirement, that there is not a threat to the sustainability of the basin based on the information that we have to date, and they have denied those appeals uniformly.
So some of these were prior to the latest community plan
I
update.
would say all of them are. In fact, I don't think we've processed any under the new community plan.
Okay,
under
that was
their
my main
permits in.
concern, is that things were happening that we weren't really hearing
No,
about.
and as to what where the coastal, I don't have any direct knowledge of what the Coastal Commission said in terms of justifying their conclusions regarding the sustainability of the basin, but the material put forward for the Coastal Commission's assessment of the water supply in Los Osos comes from the county, because we are the applicant for the amendment to the LCP. It obviously references the work done by this committee and the water purveyors working in concert with the county. So again, I have no direct knowledge of what exactly the Coastal Commission said, but the information upon which they're acting was provided them by the county.
Okay.
Can I ask one clarifying
Sure.
question? So I think sustainability is kind of an interesting term in and of itself. Do we have a consensus in the BMC at a minimum of what that means, or do we just adopt anything from the DWR or Sigma? I mean, what would that even look like?
I don't think that we
No.
have ever adopted that definition from our board here. We haven't come to that. We've looked at Sigma's definition and DDW's definition, but and how much do they align with one another? I couldn't tell you that right now either, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think adopting sustainability is a term that's been overused to the point of almost meaninglessness in my view. But we have a series of metrics that we are working to make progress on. Some moving faster and more regularly than others. Again, it's all about our adaptive management, right? We have a means of measuring the physical situation of the basin, And it is reported. In fact, we're going to be talking about the 24 annual report now. It is, it is not that we would put a stamp and say sustainable, but we're seeing this metric move and this metric move and this metric move. In all of this, of course, we are constantly, we have programs to look at whether the metrics, these single numbers that represent this incredibly complicated three-dimensional dynamic system, whether those metrics are the best simple measures or not. We're working on the question of how we model the physical condition of the basin. The transient model is important. And as we're able to characterize the hydrogeology of the basin and how it is responding to the management actions that the committee has taken, we will determine what we think is the sustainable yield. That's a dynamic process, right? And whenever information is available for us to reevaluate the condition of the basin, we use the best available science. So with the best available science right now, we have shown evidence that we think justifies the land use. The county has taken the evidence from this committee to justify the land use decision that it's making. And again, I note that there's a margin of a margin of uncertainty there that we accomplish by the work around the 80% of sustainable yield. And we're also making our land use decisions subject to a 2-to-1 retrofit to build. So, so again, the building is, according to our studied system of retrofit to build, is actually saving more water than we expect that new development to use. So all of those things come together. I think it's natural for us to want, for some to want a single word to say sustainable or not sustainable, a black, white, red, green thing. It's a little more complicated than that. And that's why we're, if it was simple, we wouldn't need all four of us sitting here on a Wednesday afternoon.
It's funny, I had thoughts on that word today, and I came to the conclusion that really any kind of use of that word is only good for the length of time you want to specify, because sustainable today doesn't guarantee tomorrow. And certainly the word has been overworked, maybe in the last few years, not just here, but I mean, everywhere, that seems to be a goal. In terms of defining it, in my mind, it always seemed like baseline would be the criteria being met in the basin plan, all the criteria, not the estimated criteria. And at that point, we could maybe start to have a discussion about, are we sustainable? But, we're so far from that, that I really hesitate to have this body used as having declared sustainability in any format or sense. And it troubles me that we're not making better progress.
Yeah, I think, there is something to be said about that, that do we want better results? Do we want faster results? Do we want it to be more black and white? I think the beginning of this journey, we had 3 purveyors pumping water. We didn't have a plan. It wasn't a coordinated effort. And, I've maintained the mindset that we've made a lot of progress. Is it where we want it to be today? I think we would all like to see some different results. And one of the key things looking forward is we've come to an agreement about the modeling and the tools that we use to assess it. And we have a new modeling coming out. I think that's going to be a big factor in, we can, after we get the modeling, we use the modeling in the way that we want to use it, we can make that a better determination. Do we need to take other actions, or is this helping us make that decision even more, and just the fact that we have a plan and are there other projects in the plan that we should be focusing in on? One of the key things is we're shifting our pumping to the east. And is that working? Is it working well enough? You know, and I mean, that's the work that we have to do moving forward. I think, you know, we were so far into seawater intrusion and such that it's, you know, going to take time and effort to resolve that and coming up to what do we accept? I think we've talked about that when we changed our sustainable yield amount, that we said we were going to halt it, you know, and not reverse it. At first, the intent was we were going to reverse it. And then now have the mindset of halting it, right?
Well, I would characterize it a little bit differently.
Okay, go ahead.
The previous definition before the BMC, this board modified the criteria for sustainable yield in 2020. One, allowed seawater to intrude further inland before stopping it. And so the board's current definition does allow for that. It halts it at current extents.
Okay.
But I mean, to the question of sustainability, I guess I would just add, I mean, that is where the board has made this sort of a unanimous decision and provided direction is the definition of sustainable yield, which was again adopted in October of 2021, the latest definition. That says we're not going to allow seawater intrusion to intrude any further than the current extents. That's been, at least from my perspective, probably the broadest definition of sustainability that the BMC has identified. We likely are going to need to revisit that with the transient model, both in terms of what do we want the constraints for sustainability or the definition for sustainability to be, and then also there's going to be a time element, you know, because we're moving from what was a steady state model that ran under, you know, thousands of iterations without really a time component to a transient model where we can look at 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years into the future and try to predict where we think the condition of the basin will be at that time under certain assumptions.
I think that's fair. And we, you know, because we're in adaptive management, the definition of sustainable yields up for review every year. And as we gain a more thorough understanding of the physical system that we're managing here, we'll make adjustments as the data drives us. But you know, in the interim, with what we have now, we've made a certain number of we've made a decision to proceed with a certain amount of development that involves new water use. Again, it's all subject to the facts on the ground. So I don't. I think it's a system that coheres. It's a system that has a rationale and a means of managing it. And again, the Coastal Commission, I don't know what exactly the Coastal Commission said, but that is not what that's up to the Coastal Commission as to how they choose to characterize the situation. So.
Okay, thank you all for that. Was a great conversation. So I think going back to what even made me ask the question is, I think maybe we all need to be speaking the same language. I mean, including the Coastal Commission, the BMC, DWR. I mean, I understand we have our adopted sustainability definition, which I'll need to go back and reread that. That was before my time here. But I think it's a fundamental question that definitely comes up continuously. So I would like to see maybe it dug into just a little bit to maybe scratch the surface and see where these different, you know, qualitative versus a quantitative measure of what we're looking at and that kind of thing. I think it's important. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would point people towards the October 27th, 2021 BMC agenda packet. And that's when, not the last time that we adopted a sustainable yield estimate, but the last time we adopted a new methodology for calculating the sustainable yield estimate.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll look at that, Beth, and if you want to bring that back, we can talk further about it, okay?
Well, and just, we will need to be revisiting that this calendar year, as we will need to adopt a sustainable yield for 2026.
Yep, good point. Okay, closing public comments for items not appearing on the agenda. Moving on to item 8, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. Happy to go through the Executive Director's Report. As you'll hear in this section and other sections, a lot of work underway in support of the BMC's monitoring and management. A large part of that work has been focused on the Water Recycling Funding Program grant and transient model. So in the Executive Director's Report, you see that we've got an approved updated schedule from the State Water Board that allowed us to incorporate AEM geophysics survey findings. The draft model has been, or the model has been calibrated and been provided to the peer review consultants, I should say, the 2 consultants, both the BMC and the counties. Their peer review is currently underway. Once we get those results back, those will be shared with the Technical Advisory Committee with the goal of bringing information on the transient model to the June meeting. I do want to qualify that. However, if there's major substantive comments that require substantive changes, then we may need a little bit more time to reevaluate the calibration before being able to bring it to the BMC. But good progress is being made. We've had a number of meetings as outlined there, great dialogue amongst the TAC members, the peer review consultant, and Clean Terrace geologist. The other thing to highlight there is, I think when we talk about the water recycling funding study, we've focused on the transient model piece of that, and that's because that has been, a large part of the effort that's been underway to date. The other part of the effort is an evaluation of different recycled water and supplemental supply opportunities for the community of Los Osos, and that work is underway as well. And so the engineering half of the team is looking at different non-potable and potable recycled water options for the Los Osos water recycling facility in the community of Los Osos. They're also evaluating increased upper aquifer nitrate treatment and imported water from the State Water Project as different supplemental supply projects that could enhance the sustainability of the Los Osos Basin. And so we should have in the next coming months not only the transient model calibration and baseline scenario results, but also scenarios that look at different supplemental supply projects and their benefits to the basin and estimates of the costs associated with those projects for the BMC's consideration. Other items, we've got this year's, our big monitoring program improvement initiative is the Sweet Springs monitoring well. We've got a consultant recommendation review in the agenda for today. We also, from kind of a carryover from last year, we modified LA14 and LA16 wells to be dedicated Zone E monitoring wells. So that work has been completed. It's stretched on into 2025 a little bit, but at this point we've done that work. And then we've got just other county planning and water recycling facility update information in the Executive Director's Report. So that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any questions before we go to public comment? Go ahead and go to public comment.
All right, if you are online, please raise your hand, and if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. We will take public comment in the boardroom first.
Patrick McGibney, please note on page 22, you still quote DWR where they're saying that our basin is in condition of critical overdraft. On page 18, you discuss sustainable yield, which is one of the metrics the county is now using to claim our basin is sustainable. After 40 years of basin overdraft, the primary purpose of the basin plan is to stop seawater intrusion to ensure a sustainable water supply, first for the current population. The county is now claiming that that has happened and have steered the Coastal Commission into believing the same by citing that the BMC has been kept within, or the basin has been kept within its estimated sustainable yield for years, with the basin yield metric under 80%. We all know these are adjustable metrics. The basin plan even says that to lower the basin yield metric, you just reduce extraction or raise the sustainable yield. But to do that, the stipulated judgment requires that you need data, you need to discuss the need and rationale, and have a unanimous vote to make the change. We remember the controversy that it was caused when the BMC illegally raised the sustainable yield to 2,760 acre-feet yearly from the court-ordered 2,400 acre-feet under the auspices that programs A and C would be completed, and they never were. Nowhere in the basin plan does it say raising the sustainable yield is your primary objective or that it will stop seawater intrusion. Overall chloride levels are higher now than they've ever been. Water levels have dropped. Why are you not discussing this? Why are you not discussing that the county is using two metrics, the sustainable yield and basin yield metric, to prove our basin has achieved sustainability for the long term? You've said many times in these past meetings that you follow SGMA guidelines in managing our basin. Well, SGMA says the sustainable yield and the basin yield metric are neither indications of nor proof of sustainability. So why are you allowing the county to use these inappropriate metrics without any pushback? To change the policy from managing an unstable basin to claiming it is now sustainable for the long term, you need proof, you need data, you need discussion, and you need a unanimous vote. Our basin is not sustainable and there is no data to show otherwise. And on a clarification for what sustainability means, DWR has that for you. And if you're following their guidelines, what they're saying is that sustainable basin is only achieved when you are pumping within the sustainable yield without any undesirable results, meaning no seawater intrusion. We have seawater intrusion. Those are undesirable results, and we are not pumping a sustainable basin right now. Thank you.
Becky McFarland, something that wasn't mentioned by Dan here, but it's in your executive director's report is about the Title 19 retrofits, I believe. Is it on page 19? Where it's a message going out to residents telling them that they can help save the aquifer by joining in on this program for new housing. I'm not sure if that's truth in advertising, that if you retrofit in your house, that you're saving the aquifer by then allowing more building to go into town. And as I've mentioned before, we're also doing unlimited guest houses, which are basically two bedroom, one bath homes with no retrofitting. And I've said over and over, there's people living in them full time. They're not evil people. People that want to build them aren't evil people, but we know they're not being used as guest houses. And no, they are not called guest bedrooms. They're called guest houses. And this affects our water. Whether we want to change a word because it's been overused, sustainable, it's in the reports, it's in, it's all over the place. If we don't have enough water and it has water quality issues, then we just need to tell the truth. Please. It's not true. We have water quality and water. Well, I guess we keep pumping and it'll all be seawater and we'll still have a full aquifer. Although not full because we haven't reached the water level metric either. So again, we need truth. Thank you.
There is no further public comment in the boardroom, so we will move to online. We have one public comment online. Whoever is representing for
Yes.
LoCAC, you can
Yeah.
talk.
Actually, I'm not representing LoCAC. This is Deborah Howe. I wanted to make a comment about what Dan said about supplemental projects. There are 2 supplemental projects that would greatly benefit from the BMC support. The first is an effort underway at Cabrillo Estates to connect to the sewer. That's over 255 homes that would be off septic and connected to the sewer. The other one is to connect the future Sunnyside Park to recycled water, which would save a tremendous amount of water there. So these are 2 projects that I hope you add to your list that could greatly benefit the aquifer. Thank you.
There's no further public comment online.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the board.
Just one thing, if I might, Mr. Chairman, to just pass back to Dan, I've actually sent him this. Mr. Reilly, the county's Director of Groundwater Sustainability, did a really interesting analysis on the measurements coming out of LA 10, and he did show a pretty remarkable correlation in the measured, and this is month by month by month, that the chloride measurement did depend on how much water was pumped in that month, and depending, it's more than we, and I don't think the data's fully processed yet, but let's call it the preliminary results. Again, show a pretty decent correlation. It suggests that if production gets into very high numbers, that the chloride concentration levels off, and it also shows that year over year there are changes in one set of the data. We're seeing the typical chloride, if you want to call it that, reduce as years go by. Again, I think that in and of itself is not conclusive information, but to the extent that we have our consultant working at some point on looking at metrics, understanding a little bit about that, since it is such a heavily weighted part of our chloride metric, would be a useful bit of analysis. So we might gain a little further understanding of that.
Yeah, and that'll be part of the metric evaluation update, is which wells to use and what they're influenced by.
What's the characteristic of we've talked for a long time about monitoring wells and production wells, and getting good information really needs to come from monitoring wells. So all good.
Yeah, there was a request regarding the supplemental supply projects. I would add that, yeah, I think the Sunnyside recycled water conversion is being considered as part of the study. It would be helpful to have the information on the Cabrillo State sewer conversion to provide that to the consultant to see if that could be evaluated or not. So put that out there.
I have one follow-on question to Supervisor Gibson, actually. It's from Mark. So with regard to LA 10, which is Rosina, correct? So that well, what was the nature of the work that was done in 2023? It looks like there was maybe some, at least it was referenced in the annual report. It looks like it was there was some work done to it to maybe make it a better monitoring well. Did it somehow isolate the upper aquifer, or was there
No,
casing or something put into
I
it?
think that work was a pump replacement. That was the work that was done in Rosina.
Okay, and it was just a 1-for-1, just a newer pump at
I
the
believe
same.
so. I believe we had a pump failure. Yeah. So it's
Okay.
just taken offline for a little while.
Okay, and it was put right back in at the same.
Yeah. There was discussion about doing work on it, and we decided not to do work on it.
Got
It
it.
has the liner and other characteristics, so
Okay.
that was abandoned.
Okay, and so the liner is intended to cut off the upper portion of the aquifer from infiltrating, or?
No, the liner was because of the casing condition, so it stopped sediment from entering into the well when we
Got
pumped
it.
it. So it wasn't to isolate one area or another. That
Okay,
liner's been in there for 25 plus years.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so but it is screened a little bit in Zone E as well as Zone D.
I don't know off the top. I
I-
mean, yeah.
I think at least that's what's in the annual report. But anyways, I do think these are all interesting things that we'll probably have to consider, you know, with the bigger picture about that well, but be it a monitoring well or not, so.
Yeah. No, we have been looking at it a little bit, but when we looked at the amount of, originally we talked about that Rosina pumped a little bit more this year, and it really wasn't that big of a change from past years. You know, I think it was more that it was operating during the sampling time. So it might have been that it was operating, but from a volume standpoint, there wasn't more water pulled out of, or substantially more water pulled out of Rosina than we have in the past on annual. It was just the fact that it was, so maybe it gave a better representation of what's down there, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it's, you know, there's just a lot of unknowns when you got the liner in there.
Mhm.
It does raise all the questions and definitely has unusual characteristics about that well.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and I hope that I wouldn't have to say these words, but yeah, it is also influenced by borehole leakage, which has been one of the real challenges as we get upper aquifer influence. We see that in the elevated nitrates and the samples, and so then we have to try to get more representative samples of the lower aquifer.
Yeah. Okay. We will close the item 8, the executive director's report, and move on to the action item 9. We have 3 items. We'll start with 9A.
Yeah, so 9A, I'm trying to move through this quickly. The BMC was awarded a grant from the Rose Foundation, part of their community-based water quality grant program of $150,000 to install new dedicated monitoring wells. And so the proposed location that we're calling the Sweet Spring monitoring wells are over by 4th and Ramona, or Pismo and 5th. Still trying to finalize where that well would go. As part of that process, we needed to select a hydrogeologist to do the design and construction oversight. And so the BMC sent out a request for proposals, received 4 proposals, had those proposals reviewed by BMC party staff representatives, and the recommendation is to award the project to Cleeth Harris geologists based on their extensive experience working in the Los Osos Basin and low cost. And we've got some budget information in here just to show that we have 200,000 budgeted for this project, and the hydrogeo component of that is estimated to be 35,000.
Okay. And that's our contribution. That's part of our contribution for this project, right? Didn't we have to have a certain contribution?
Yeah, it will count, you know. I mean, we
Okay,
just
yeah.
add it all together and yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll move on to public comment for 9A.
If you're in the boardroom and you would like to make a public comment, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. It looks like there's no public comment in the boardroom or online.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move to action item 9B, presentation on the draft 2024 annual monitoring report.
Yeah, so excited to present the 2024 draft annual monitoring report. I think this is my 5th annual report, potentially, so somewhat of a milestone for me.
The 11th.
I think something like that. Yeah, going back to 2015. And but I'll probably go through it relatively quickly as we've presented a lot of the key components of the annual monitoring report to the BMC at least once, if not twice already, as they had become available, including at our last meeting where we reviewed the metrics and other key findings. So, but just some procedural things. So the public comment period is open and continues to be open through May 28th. The report was a little late coming out for public review this year, so we're extending it past this meeting date, which is not typical. But if you do have public comments, please submit them to me at the email here on the screen by May 28th at 5 p.m. And this is just primarily it's kind of a receive and file item for the BMC, and just to kind of confirm our schedule for approval, which is just to bring it back at the next regularly scheduled BMC meeting. Here's our rainfall graphs for 2024 above average. So that's good. And unfortunately, I think when we get the 2025 rainfall, we won't be above average, as this winter has not, that we're just exiting, has not been as good. And we can see, well, last year's rainfall, one way to kind of assess its benefit and or how much rainfall we got and its benefit to the basin is how much the creek flows. So we've got two hydrographs here that show creek flows from 2024. As you can see, it took till about maybe the end of January, and we got a little bit of a late start in 2024 to the rain season, but then had a pretty healthy raining season, as you can see by the peaks there in the 2024 data, and ran all the way through the end of this. Well, this doesn't cover the whole year, but it does show that it ran well into the summer. And so that's great. That's recharge that we're getting into the basin. 2023 was an even wetter year, and we saw even more flow in the creek that year. But good to have a couple of wet years. Groundwater production, rough numbers here. Municipal production is about 1,000 acre feet per year, roughly half CSD, half Golden State, and with S&T a small fraction of that. Total production is around 1,700 acre feet per year. So the additional production comes from an estimated 500 acre feet of agriculture, 50 acre feet of community, and 110 of domestic, or what I call rural residential, people on individual wells outside of purveyor service areas. Recycled water, we show this table. The far right column shows actual deliveries of recycled water. So the majority going to Broderson of 456 acre feet per year. And with some little bits to Bay Ridge, some to Sea Pines, and a very minor amount for agriculture. The one thing we point out here every year is that the actual deliveries are a lot less than the planned deliveries, and that's really can be attributed to, a large part of that is just the conservation by the community of their indoor water use. The basin metrics, I think we go into these as individual slides, so I will probably skip that. We have the chloride metric and water level metric. We've shown this twice to the BMC. We saw a slight dip in the water level metric in 2024, and then a jump in the chloride metric in 2024, largely associated with the elevated chlorides in the Rosina well that we discussed earlier. Change in storage was positive. So we saw slight increases in the amount of fresh water in storage, 300 acre feet, and then the upper part of the western central area of the basin, and then 100 acre feet in the upper part, the alluvial and lower part of the eastern portion of the basin, for a total of 400 acre feet of increased freshwater and storage. If you look at that cumulatively, You can see the 400-foot increase in the spring there, and an increase in groundwater and storage over the last, what is that, 7 years, both in the spring and the fall measurements. So that's beneficial. Saw an interesting graph yesterday. I didn't get a chance to put it in here, but I guess it was DWR had put together a slide showing the cumulative change in groundwater and storage in adjudicated basins. So not just Los Osos, but adjudicated basins statewide. And largely, I think, was positive. So I thought that was good for groundwater management. Nitrate metric. This is the nitrate metric. We did see a slight increase in the nitrate metric. That's a deterioration, but you can see the 5-year average is still exhibiting a significant decline, and actually below the projected trend line from the basin plan towards the target of 10 milligrams per liter. So generally, overall positive news for nitrate metric. This is the seawater intrusion plan level mapping of the 250 milligram per liter chloride isopleth, or sort of the extent of seawater intrusion in the central portion of the basin from 2019 through 2024. Unfortunately, kind of associated with the elevated chlorides in Rosina, we saw the 2024 contour move east to similar extents to where it was estimated to be in 2020. We had seen it previously further back along Petro Road in 2022 and 2023. Again, this is somewhat, our ability to draw these contours is somewhat limited by our data availability. And so it is nice that we have LA 43 now, as you can see to the east there. That's the new Skyline monitoring well. So that's another good data point. LA 41 up by Cuesta by the Sea was a new data point that we put in in 2019. So we can better characterize the extent of the seawater intrusion with those wells. I think there may be a recommendation coming to have another well near the Broderson area to characterize the southern area also. So that could be a future recommendation coming to the BMC. And then we've got, this is zone D, but with LA 14 and 16 conversions, we'll have good dedicated monitoring locations at the northern end of Broderson Road, and then along Palisades Road as well, in this critical area for seawater intrusion in the basin. Oh, and we had some animation. Sorry, I missed that. Upper aquifer profile. So this is monitoring of water levels in the upper aquifer for protection against seawater intrusion. We are showing healthy levels in the upper aquifer monitoring locations, with the exception of UA5. We see it dip slightly below the protective elevation. This is not unique to this year. I believe this has happened in the couple of years. So it's something we continue to monitor for potential seawater intrusion in the upper aquifer. And then projects. So we had a number of projects that have been ongoing. The main one that's been ongoing in 2024 was the LLCSD's Bay Oaks well, which I think a large part of construction was completed in 2024. Now we're just waiting on PG&E to hook it up and turn it on. And hopeful that'll happen next month in June. And I hope we have a big ribbon cutting to celebrate this long-awaited milestone. Yeah. And just some other projects that are ongoing. I think we've covered the ongoing ones in the executive director's report. Some recommendations. Update sustainable yield. Now that the second program C well has been identified, that was completed using the steady state model. We can consider revisiting it with the transient model. That'll be, a future BMC decision. The metrics we talked about, updating the metrics is something we all want to do. It's currently on hold, just largely while we get through the transient model and while we continue to improve our monitoring network. Peer review of the basin model is something that was identified in the stipulated judgment. We're not peer reviewing the steady state model, but we are developing a transient model that's including multiple peer reviews. So I think we're meeting the objective of that goal. UA5 we just discussed under the protective elevation with some slightly increasing chlorides. So we're going to continue to monitor the water quality at that well. Unfortunately, we were unable to locate the lost monitoring well, FW7 near Broderson. I went out there with some equipment, an excavator, and tried to find it, and they were unsuccessful. So it remains lost. And I don't know if there's much intent to try to find it at this point, but we'll see. And then the Sweet Springs monitoring well is ongoing, and we're making action here at this meeting in support of that. So schedule, the annual report's been out since May 16th. We're reviewing it here. Public comments are due May 28th. We have a June 18th regularly scheduled BMC meeting to consider approval of the final annual report and submission to the court. And then the goal of doing that by June 30th to meet our court required deadlines. So that concludes my presentation on the annual report.
Thank you, Dan. Any clarifying questions before we go?
Help me to understand, I think I heard that the amount of storage above sea level, freshwater storage above, it increased by 400 acre feet, but the overall water level metric dropped?
Yeah, so my understanding is, the water level metric is the water level in the 4 or 5 key wells that, we monitor and add together and average. And so that gives us the average water level at those wells. Whereas when they look at the calculated amount of groundwater and storage, they look at all the wells in the basin and try to create a sort of a three-dimensional plane that represents that groundwater elevation, and then to calculate the volume of water underneath that, or between that and sea level. And so presumably, we may have seen increases in water levels in wells that aren't in the water level metric, and that would attribute to that sort of the difference in the trend in those two items.
I would just add that trying to reconcile that increase or decrease in groundwater storage with observables like water levels is challenging in every basin that's under management right now, because not only is it a three-dimensional view, but the amount depends on assumptions regarding average porosity and permeability and things, again, back to that complexity of the physical system we're trying to understand.
Yeah, it seems like a refinement perhaps from just the water level metric overall, but just trying to understand how that all comes together.
It's a worthy quest.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to public comment.
If you have a public comment and you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in person, please come up to the podium. We will take public comment in person first.
Robert Sarby. I'm a little confused by this draft report. First average rainfall for the area is 17.3 inches. 2024 rainfall was above average at 21.63 inches. Groundwater production was estimated at 1,690 acre feet. The sustainable yield is 2,380 feet. And yet the water levels dropped by almost 5%. chloride levels increased by 20%. Nitrate levels increased by 10.5%. And 8 of the 17 wells experienced an increase in chloride levels over 2023. The only logical conclusion I can come to is that your groundwater production estimates are extremely flawed and underreported. And I'll note that your previous groundwater assessments in previous years were over 2,000 acre-feet. And somehow we went down to 1,690 feet. I understand about the recycled water, but that doesn't make up the deficit. So hopefully someone can explain that to me. Thank you.
Becky McFarland. I'd like further explanation about the increase in nitrates and what's causing that. Why are we seeing an increase in nitrates? Also, could there be further explanation of what is meant by, and I think the word was used, revising the metrics, or is it redoing the metrics? Is it changing them so that they make things look better? It's just a question. And then how do we know about the water level metric if that's not seawater that's making it rise? And are those increases in the water level in the same wells that there are increases in the chloride? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the board.
There's no public comment online.
Oh, sorry about that, Jamie. We'll bring it back to the board now. Thank you.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, it seems like the issues raised in public comment are appropriately referred to our technical expert as comments. As part of the comment period that's open, and we'll let him go ahead and explain those. I don't think it would be useful for us to speculate on that in the absence of some expert knowledge on this.
Okay, sounds good. I agree with that.
And so the closing of comments on the 28th, that is for all comments. So at that point, they're going to be reviewed. So there won't be another BMC meeting to understand what was incorporated or what might have been adjusted per the comments.
Well, there'll be the June BMC where the final report will be presented, and that will have any potential adjustments that were made in response to comments.
Okay, but no further comments are anticipated to be.
No,
Elevated in
at
time.
that point, I mean, the BMC has the board has full authority, obviously, to do what it wants, and can request changes at that meeting, and we can convey those to the hydrogeologist for incorporation if they're in agreement. But we just are kind of run out of time. Now, the BMC also could say, well, we're going to be late this year because we want to take more comments. But historically, we've just approved the final report as is or with minor modifications for submission to the court.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I guess I'll go into the things that are my questions. I think the overarching comment is the same as everyone. I mean, we are, we have our Basin plan, we have our metrics, and we have our goals, but we don't seem to be meeting them. And I'm hoping that next month the transient model maybe sheds some light onto those issues. So I understand this annual report can't really incorporate the findings of the transient model, which is understandable, but I assume next year's will. So as far as the sustainable yield that we will be deliberating on at the end of this year, I assume that we'll still be able to incorporate information from the transient model. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of inclined to just, assume that things could change depending on what comes out. And we'll have to relook at a lot of these different things once again. So with that being said, one of my questions, and I'm just curious, and I understand this does come from the Basin Plan, but when we talk about the contaminants of emerging concern, the CECs, how come we're not looking at any of the PFAS detections? Is that something that we could add, because I mean, since the Basin Plan has come out, PFAS has kind of become more of a thing, and now it's actually going to be regulated, but none of that data is presented in this annual report, which I do think, I think qualitatively is an important measure of our basin and the overall health of the water quality. So I think that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you, Beth.
Yeah, so I think that's a good comment. We can, take that as a comment to on the draft annual report about consideration of PFAS as a contaminant in future monitoring reports. I know that the purveyors and the county have done some PFAS investigations associated with state requirements, and that data is all publicly available. But yeah, we could consider having a discussion around the PFAS in the annual report.
In future annual reports, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that we'll have time to
No.
incorporate it into this one, but
Okay. Okay. If there's no other comments,
If nobody else has anything else, I do have one other thing. So with regard to the storage, it is kind of a wonky way of looking at it because you're, what means what here. So if 400 was added roughly in storage, how much of that, and does that include, and I understand you may not know the answer, but it's probably pretty straightforward, how much of that, if any, does include the Broderson Mound and any formation that's happened there?
yeah, no, I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, so that would be a question for Spencer on how much the Broderson influence has affected that.
I think it's a legitimate question to be asked.
Yeah.
There are these methodologies that I've, again, not an expert in this, but seen the results of it. And there's a methodology that's used to calculate this increase in storage. It is not always well reconciled with other observations and effects that are going on. But it's a piece of standardized hydrogeologic analysis. So I think any explanations as to how it relates to the kinds of decisions we make in a variety of management issues is perfectly good one. I think that's, though, definitely a Spencer question.
So I think your question about the comments in the review, do we have the comments online? Any written comments are viewable, is that correct? Or do they only go to you and then some of them are addressed and some of them aren't? I mean, I think that was a good question to bring up. Like, how do we see if a comment was out there and if it changed the document that we review? It'll be so difficult to go and find those changes unless you know what specifically where to go look.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's varied over the years how we've approached it. I mean, that we've definitely have had years where we've received extensive comment letters and prepared extensive comment responses. And yeah, but I mean, that's something that we can do. We've received one set of comments submitted to me, and that has been posted on the website for, as part of, what do we call it? Public correspondence. So that's available. And if you'd like to see a comment response log for this year's annual report, yeah, we can have that prepared.
I think a simple matrix.
Yeah.
Comment, response, and was any change made to the draft?
As an appendix to the annual report,
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it just seems like it would wrap it all up together. People
Yeah.
would know what the comments were, how we responded.
Yep.
Sort of like an EIR.
Yep.
Good comment. Okay.
Can I have one more?
Sure.
So this is just, I do see these numbers in the annual report, and I know you had mentioned LA 43, I believe, but specifically LA 42, which is the monitoring well at the end of Skyline. Is that correct? So there is water quality data and there's some groundwater, water levels as well. I do see that the chloride in that well, I'm seeing one for 1800, one for 1900. Do you know off the top of your head how is that specifically in zone E, or is this okay? Do we have any chloride data from that well? Are we going to be able to see chloride data from that well for zone D?
So sorry, are you referring to LA 43, the skyline monitoring well?
Oh, is that 42 or 43?
There's two wells, so maybe it's 42 and 43. One is a dedicated zone E well, and the other is a dedicated zone D well.
Got it. So is it one single well and then they just have the whatever line is going to that certain part? Got it. Okay, that makes more sense because then that would mean LA 43 must be zone D.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Nope, good. Okay. All right, sounds good. We're going to go ahead and close this. I think you have direction on the comment part, right, Dan? We'll include
Correct.
that? Okay.
Yep.
All right, sounds good. We'll move to action item 9C, an update from San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and the Water Conservation District regarding project water transfers or state water transfers.
Yeah, so sorry, let me get reorientated here. Yeah, so this is an item that we brought to the BMC, I think back in late 2024. San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District staff have been working on an initiative to develop some updated state water policies for the Board of Supervisors to consider in providing additional guidance and a framework for how to make decisions related to state water within San Luis Obispo County. And the last policies were updated in 2003, so a lot's changed since then, including there's been changes to the state water contracts that allow for easier transfers and sales of state water. And one outcome of that is in 2024, the district was able to sell approximately $5 million worth of state water that was vulnerable to spills at San Luis Obispo Reservoir. And so that, San Luis, yes, thank you. Yeah, yep. And that is a benefit to the countywide taxpayer as well as the subcontractors in their ability to receive cost recovery for state water they're not using, and that they historically have seen lost to spills or an inability to store the water at San Luis Reservoir. On average, the district has lost approximately 8,000 acre feet per year since 1996 due to those spills and losses. Additionally, there's approximately 1,500 acre feet of unused capacity or unused San Luis Obispo capacity in the Polonio Pass water treatment plant and phase 2, the Coastal Branch pipeline, that the current subcontractors are not utilizing. And so both of those things represent significant opportunities to put the water resource and infrastructure to more beneficial use. However, as I understand it, before, the district staff wants to do that, it would like to get some policy direction from the board on how to prioritize those resources. And so that's what is being presented to you today is a draft policy document that was developed by district staff as well as state water subcontractor staff representatives. and as well as input from others. And so we wanted to bring it to the Basin Management Committee, as it is the Los Osos is potentially an interested party in state water through the Los Osos CSD Water Resiliency Project, and just to see if there were any comments or thoughts that the BMC would like to provide with respect to this potential policy document. And just some of the key elements of the policy document as currently written. Again, this is draft from staff and the advisory committee. It lists a prioritization of how these water and infrastructure resources could be utilized. And then it lists a set of potential criteria that could be evaluated when making decisions when the board makes decisions for how to make this water available to others. And so that really concludes my presentation. I guess just a couple of key things to hit, I should say, is that, this is, as I understand it, it's just a policy guidance document, no actual decisions in terms of how that water could be, who that water could be given to, or that capacity could be given to, are being made with the Board of Supervisors' consideration of this policy, but it is intended to, again, provide a framework and guide the district staff and the board in making decisions in the future of how to better put these state water resources to different uses to maximize the benefit to San Luis Obispo County.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I have a couple question and responses, but I think I'll save them till after public comment. So I don't know if we want to have any clarifying questions before we go to public comment, or.
I do have one clarifying question. So you had mentioned this is related to spillage at the reservoir. So is this water even going to be available in dry years?
Yeah, so typically the spills occur in wet years. So in a year that spills, it tends to be a high allocation state water year. And so while you lose a lot of water to spills, you end up putting a lot of water back into storage that year. And then that water, that one of the nice things about San Luis Reservoir is that there are no evaporative losses that are tied to the stored water that is put into that reservoir. So if the district is able to store 1,000 acre feet per water, and that doesn't spill and it doesn't use that water for 3 years, it's got 1,000 acre feet of water sitting in San Luis Reservoir waiting for it. If it does spill, then that 1,000 acre foot is gone, but likely it can put another 1,000 acre foot back into storage because it's a high allocation year. Hopefully that answered the question.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
And it doesn't necessarily make sense on the front end, but yeah, as long as the reservoir is not spilling, whatever we have stored there is there for us. And that's been a fair amount, but when it does spill, it's gone, and it's completely, it seems at one level completely illogical, but I guess there's an internal logic to it there. What the key as to where we are is that the flood control district, the governing board of which is the Board of Supervisors, as I think you know, contracted for 25,000 acre feet. Right now, our subcontractors only have signed subcontracts for about 10,000 of it. So there's 15,000 acre feet of potential use there. You say, well, that sounds pretty good, except that on average, the state water project is projected to deliver about 60% of its contracted yield on the long term, right? Climate change and demand and a whole bunch of other things have caused them to reevaluate, which was something which in 1962 was approved with high hopes. So we're actually in a good situation, having having not used our entire allocation. But I think one of the key things in this, there are two key things I'd point you to in this draft set of policies. One is the statement right up front in the general provisions that state water is to be considered a supplemental supply, not a primary supply for any others. And the other is this is being brought to us because the conversation is coming to it's ripe for consideration right now, is what about all this unused capacity? How are we going to make use in the best possible way? And the other thing I'd point you to here is a set of priorities, is that the current subcontractors have a first priority. And, you know, and then it goes down to public water agencies and place of use. And there's I think 5 or 6 different priorities as to if there's a proposal to use some state water on an ongoing basis, that's prioritized. For the Los Osos situation, I think we're much more looking at the occasional or opportunistic purchase of excess water when that's available, which is in the interest of the flood control district and its subcontractors if they don't need to use their entire thing. So there's a lot of nuance, I guess, into how this gets used. And again, it's draft. Our board has not approved it at this point.
Okay, so that may help, maybe. So Ron would probably be the one to answer this, but this is a different pool of water versus what Ron is potentially going to negotiate for to buy the allocation from Morro Bay?
I've been involved or have sat in on all these subcontractor meetings, and this is at least the 3rd or 4th iteration of the policy. And I think they finally got it to a place. I think it's good because the Schedule A, that's the guaranteed, not guaranteed, but the water that the subcontractors have, like Morro Bay, Pismo, et cetera. You know, they have the right to the capacity and to the water. It's been a great deal for them because they've got drought buffer that they can subscribe to very inexpensively. There's communities like ours that these decisions were made back in the mid-90s, so it's 30 years ago. A lot of things have changed. We didn't have a CSD we had an advisory council, but we didn't have another type of agency or CSD to be our voice. So that's just to frame this up, that as Supervisor Gibson said, that the way the transfers are set up, it's in the priority of use. To actually get Schedule A water, we would have to find a willing seller, like another agency that is already subcontracted to get that type of delivery. The transfers in our mind, CSD minds, has always been when it's there, you take it, you decrease our pumping, and like it says, supplemental. It's just to help offset our pumping and production to help our basin recover, because the basin is our big storage tank. And so the concept is for us to use one of these levels of transfer and be able to purchase water and bring it in anywhere from 200 acre feet to 600 acre feet, depending on the year and the capacity available.
But we would not be joining the Schedule A list of subcontractors.
Not unless we find someone willing to sell and
Right.
it's at a price. The policies, I think there. I really like the policy. The key piece is the financial side that the subcontractors and the flood control district can't seem to come to agreement on. So, there's the concept for the subcontractors is they want cost recovery. Well, that's fine, but what does that mean? And are you going back to 1995 or, so anyway, those are going to be the challenges, what that water is actually going to cost once you get it in a pipe.
Any clarification about priority number 3, prioritize place of use? That's kind of vague. I mean, does that mean yards, indoors, communities?
I'm trying to recall, I think place of use is more of, and I don't know, Dan, you've been involved in the whole rewrite, but that one is kind of vague, because I always looked at it as the priorities were urban and you could go down and down in priority. So place of use is sort of like where it lies in the priorities, with ag being towards the bottom.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, reading it briefly, I don't know you have it, Director Gibson, but it's, there's the priority for type of use. And then I think the priority for place of use is to prioritize places where if somebody already has capacity to use that water at a similar location, they would get priority over somebody else who
Well,
didn't. Or,
Yeah, I think it's right up there in the first paragraph. The original delivery location established under each of the subcontractors' water supply. So each of the agencies that receiving it is using that water in a particular location. It says the original delivery location established by those subcontractor agreements is considered the preferred place of use. So if you were evaluating two potential uses, new uses, that that if it's connected with a place that was part of a subcontractor, that would be the preferred. But then it goes on to say, however, when capacity allows, requests for emergency or domestic use at other locations should take precedence over requests for ag or non-ag. So that would fit directly into what the CSD is trying to do.
Right. Okay.
And the nice thing about it is that state water gets delivered treated. So it could just be plugged in. The pipeline from Morro Bay could plug right into the CSD's existing distribution system without further treatment.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ron. And a couple more follow-on questions. So it looks like so the county is the owner of the allocation or the owner of the water.
It's the contractor, yes.
The
yes.
main.
We're the, yes.
Okay, so you would look at these priorities and then it would basically go before the Board of Supervisors. You would determine whether Los Osos was a worthy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would have fondness in our hearts for Los Osos.
I would imagine. So then my follow-on question to that is the intent of this? I mean, I understand Ron's trying to do the pipeline project. Are we envisioning the Basin Management Committee adopting a priority project that brings in another source of water to somehow offset our pumping here? Is that the bigger goal?
I don't know about the Basin Management Committee, but I'd let the CSD speak to that.
Obviously, we would like it to be a partnership. We've had lots of discussions with Golden State and they're trying to work through their, regulations, PUC approvals, how that could be structured. I know I've talked to you a little bit about participation by S&T. We had kicked around that the BMC somehow, some way, since all of the purveyors plus the county, which has the water, could maybe be a partner in some way, shape or form. But this is still unfolding. To build the pipeline, it's a very large public works project for a little community like this. And so it has challenges. And so the more partners we have, the better.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That helps.
this just, this has been evolving, like Ron said, there's been variations of this policy over the last few months, and so this one just came out last week, I think, and it looks pretty good, but, ultimately it is interruptible and it should be viewed more as a basin management tool than actually a source of supply. I did have a couple questions just regarding the policy itself and making comments from the BMC or versus some other mechanism. I don't know if we want to gather some comments together and comment on it as a group and make those decisions of, do we want to tie this more into a BMC project that, in my opinion, it seems like it would be better managed as far as if we're going to go and look at basin conditions and have our water purchases be based on our evaluation and annual report. And then we determine how much water we're going to try to secure that year. And then is it available to put that onto the district solely and not have the BMC weighing in on it? To me, it seems better suited as a basin management tool that would come before the BMC and we talk about it here and develop it and we, figure out a rate structure, a governance. We need a governance to do that. I don't think, one of my questions was here is that I see under the criteria for use, it can't be contracted to a non-public water agency, which would be us. We would have to change. So there would have to be some governance, those types of things. There would have to be a lot more discussion and decision making, and I think along the lines overarching, to me, we should pursue this as a BMC tool to manage the basin, bringing water in, offsetting our pumping. Some years water may not be available, but other years, you look at the average that Dan threw out there, they're spilling water that could be brought in here and we could reduce our pumping. Similar to what we just talked about with Rosina and such, if we reduce that pumping, it's going to benefit the basin. And having that connection to the Choro line, we have a tool to manage, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I had another question regarding the Choro line. It looked like there was some discussion that there could be additional governance based on that Choro line. There was a section under A, or 3A, the second paragraph, it starts talking about the Choro line. Oh shoot, I'm sorry, it's not that one. It's yeah, I got it. These are my pages here. There was a section that talked about the Choro line. Oh yeah, application and interpretation, AB, the second paragraph talks about it. So I just wasn't clear on that. Probably have to read it a little more in detail, but it did talk about that was different than the CCWA state line. It was more of there's three different branches off the CCWA line, the Choro and Lopez. And so we need to understand that. Is there going to be additional requirements coming off the Choro line? But basically, I don't know. I think it's something we need to talk about. I think on this action item, we had a question about, what is our next step? So we should maybe talk about that and figure out, is this something we want to keep in the BMC realm and continue discussing it and going down the path of, is this a tool that we can, through our adaptive management, use as a tool to manage the basin?
Could I offer you a frame? I think you're right, Mr. Chairman. I think it is something the BMC should look at, BMC staff in particular should look at carefully and make sure that it works. I would propose, so let me speak as a member of the governing board of the flood control district. As we consider these policies among subcontractors and how we set up what do we want to call them, excess water or temporary water purchases, I would propose that the water purveyors and their staff consider these. I would certainly, as a BMC representative, having this dual role, I would certainly want to hear comments so that these policies would give the Los Osos groundwater basin a fair shot at utilizing this resource. So as I consider, when I would vote for, to approve these policies at whatever time they come before the board, I'd want to be sure that my partners on this committee had looked at them to say, yeah, this works for us, or if you tweak this, it would work better for us, all in the pursuit of you having a fair opportunity to make use of the excess state water is a term of art, but the what's it called? In times of plenty, it's not scheduled. We're not talking about table A. We're talking about the when extra water is available.
The excess capacity.
Well, it's again, I want to make sure I say it right.
So
Surplus. The
surplus.
surplus, that the access to the surplus supplies is, you have a fair shot at the access to the surplus.
And I guess so, what I'm hearing is that you would support the purveyors to be part of this,
The commenters.
but the county wouldn't participate, specifically when I'm referring to the BMC, I'm including the county in on
Yeah.
that, like this would be, instead of one of our projects that we have, this would be a project. And, as the representative of private well owners and such, would the county be contributing to that? Because that's the part where now you have other users of the basin that are benefiting, and the cost of this is solely going on the water purveyors.
That engages a conversation that we have tabled for the moment on sharing the cost, right?
Yeah.
And do we need a different governance structure than
Exactly.
this committee? But that's in the specifics of actually taking an allocation. As you look at the details here, the way I look at this, with the CSD having taken the lead on any question of connecting to state water, it's a little like the different Program C wells that we've been talking about, right? There's a CSD well, there's a Golden State well, there are interties, there are a number of different projects that under a current governance structure, individual purveyors or purveyors working in concert with each other are pursuing. And right now, with our current governance structure, it seems to make sense for the CSD to be the lead in pursuing this. Whether we want to go to a different governance structure that accompanies an assessment that distributes the cost of these various things in a different way than it is right now is a separate, important, but I think separate question than this. This is a matter of having a system set up that would help us in Los Osos work on the basin's stability.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just responding to Ron's comment about a partnership of, having partners out there, and my thought was going through the BMC. So just kind of making that, that's my
agree.
viewpoint, that seems like that would be the most equitable for the community overall, but more to discuss on that.
I would agree with that, Chairman Zimmer. I think that, I think though, if we are going to move forward with this in any sort of realm within the BMC, the purveyors, I mean, we all have to kind of work in a concerted way. Obviously, the county has their role too, but if the goal here is to offset some of the pumping that could be deleterious to what is occurring now, then I think that's an obvious solution for us.
Okay. We'll go to public comment.
If you are online and you have a public comment, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And we will take public comment in the boardroom first.
Becky McFarland. I'd like to read some excerpts from an article from the California Water Impact Network, or CWIN. The headline is "Coming Clean. State Water Resources Control Board Finally Acknowledges Paper Water." In a proposed update to the management plan for the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers and their shared delta, the State Water Resources Control Board has finally acknowledged California's water supplies are oversubscribed by 500%. For the first time, the board explicitly acknowledges what we've been saying for more than 2 decades, says Carol Krieger of CWIN. In its proposed update, the board notes total appropriative water rights amount to 5 times the average unimpaired outflow of the entire Bay Delta watershed. So in other words, there's a 500% disparity between the water that is claimed and the water that exists. In a 1994 report on the financing of the state water project for the California State Library, researcher Dennis O'Connor coined the term paper water to describe this phantom water that is found in legal and government documents, but not in our reservoirs and rivers. It's fantasy water, a complete fabrication, and yet it's foundational to the catastrophic policies of both state and federal water project managers. Since its completion, the coastal branch has never provided its target supplies, says Krieger. Ratepayers have seen their water bills skyrocket because they have to service the debt incurred to build the project, but they've never seen full deliveries of the promised water. They've been left high and dry, both literally and economically. We need to establish safe yield policies that recognize the limits of water supply, the rights of all stakeholders, including ratepayers, and the necessity for environmental protection. So this discussion has been really good and it sounds great. This just came out this year from the California State Resources Control Board. So I'm wondering, at these county level talks, does that ever come into question? I mean, do you listen to what the state's saying, that they're 500% oversubscribed? You know, the Bay Area, the Delta has lots of farmers pulling water out of there. I don't understand the whole spillage thing. I know they spill water, but how fast does it spill? And if it's spilled really quickly, how do we store that before it all flows out to the sea? So I believe these people, they've been studying this for many years and it's 500% oversubscribed already. So I don't know. This doesn't sound good to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there's no further public comment in the boardroom, but there is one online. Lindy, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is actually Patrick McGibney with the Sustainability Group on Lindy's computer. I just wanted to clarify something that most of you have been using the word supplemental water. There is a definition in the basin plan of what supplemental water is, which is water within the basin itself. It does not include outside water sources such as state water. So make sure that when you're talking about supplemental water, you're talking about what we have within our basin and not something we're trying to bring in for extra water. Thank you.
There's no further public online or in the boardroom.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring it back to the board.
So actually, I do appreciate Becky's comment because that's one of the things I think that's in the forefront of my mind. I mean, especially not so much now because we've had some wet years, but you constantly hear about over allocation of water and paper water. And obviously, you know, there's extents to which they can actually pump a reservoir in a dry year. I mean, you're gonna be stopped at some point. They're not gonna run it dry. There's other requirements, environmental requirements, and so I would really appreciate it if Supervisor Gibson could speak to that.
Well, you know, I'd have to look at what claim was actually made in the piece that was read to us. I'm not sure what that references, but the information from the State Water Project is that current estimate is that over an average over the course of, let's say, a 20 to 40-year average, the project is estimated to be able to deliver 60% of what it was designed to. So the 25,000 acre foot contract that the flood control district has to benefit this county, we can expect on the average 60% of that over the long haul. So that's, and the way it's currently structured, and this gets seriously in the weeds, subcontractors are taking ballpark 5,000 acre feet, and they bought 5,000 acre feet of drought buffer, which means that in a year when the State Water Project only delivers 50% of what it's designed for, that those subcontractors would be made whole because they purchased a buffer, an equal amount of buffer to buffer their use. So what that says is that there is some amount within the current calculation, there's some amount of water that is available on a regular, you know, reasonably reliable basis on a long-term average. And clearly the future is averages don't occur, right? We deal wet, we deal dry. And that's one of the motivating factors, as I understand it, for the change in the policies, the contract agreement changes that the county's already made with the project. These policies in front of us are then the pass-through from the county to the subcontractors about how we can, allocate the benefit of the whatever benefit the state water project provides, how we allocate that to the subcontractors, how we handle sales, how we handle surplus water, all those kinds of things. The 5 times oversubscription, I don't know what that refers to, but what I do know is what the state water project is saying about that. One more big asterisk, which is the Delta Conveyance Project, which is the tunnel, the long sought. I was going to say improvement, but at least it's a modification to the state water project. $20 billion project the governor is committed to. Controversial on a number of levels, but from a state water system perspective, it does increase the reliability of the state water system. And the county has participated in the preliminary stages of that project in an effort to protect the investment that we've already made. So, yeah, these are reasonable questions as to the reliability. If it would be the will of the BMC as a whole to ask those questions of reliability when you submit contracts, comments on these proposed policy changes, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Gibson. So I guess my only question is there any history of this even happening? Has
Yeah.
it ever been that there was a deterrence of water use because?
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, the state water project right now is, I think it's estimating deliver 15% or 20%. Maybe it's up to 30% now.
40, right?
40, they got to 40.
50.
Oh, it's been
Coming up, it's coming up.
keeps going up.
Yeah.
So they're committing, I guess, or planning to deliver 50% of the contracted amounts this year.
Delivering 50%.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess my question is, has there ever been an attempt to withdraw over 100% of what was allocated?
No,
Okay,
no, we can't because that's the contract.
right, but I'm saying, so, right, so I think, yes, we're talking around the same thing. So, and you're saying 60% is the average.
But
Okay.
I think what's happening there though, Beth, is that even though there's only 50% of it, not all those subcontractors are taking that full 50%.
Right.
So they have the opportunity to store it in San Luis Reservoir if they're not going to take it. And that water gets stored there and, maybe one of the thoughts for storing it is that you might need it later in additional drought years or some point, but then you get a wet year and that water will spill over. So that's when Dan referenced that there was an average of 8,000 acre feet of water spilling per year, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of water that flows over, that is spilled over because of these contractors aren't using, even though it's a reduced percentage and it termed is over prescribed, there's still water that's out there that's being wasted and spilled. And that's what we're trying to capture is these subcontractors have the first priority to that water. There's water to be had out there. And that, when I was talking about the management of it, it's a heavy load to really stay on top of that, to manage it, to put in, what water you're gonna hope to purchase on that year. That's where I thought it would be better suited in this forum here, that we could talk about it and agree to it and have these kind of discussions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great discussion. I agree with Director Gibson's assessment. State water is complicated, but it can be a valuable resource. I mean, this year, for example, we've had a very poor rainfall year here in our local watersheds in the Southern Sierra, but in the Northern Sierra, they're above average. And that really attributes to the 50% allocation, which is higher than we had last year when we had more rainfall here. So there are advantages to accessing water from watersheds elsewhere in the state. But I guess what I would be looking for is any sort of direction, or do we want to just leave it up to the individual purveyors to comment on this? That might be easier given the county's dual role.
Yeah, I would stay out of comments in deference to my dual role, but with the clear sense to. I would stay out of comments in my dual role as governing of the Flood Control District Board, but certainly within this context would encourage purveyors to think carefully about what's, what in these policies is beneficial or detrimental to the interests of the Los Osos groundwater basin.
And when are the comments due back? Do we know?
I don't know
It-
that we have a
the-
specific due
Well,
date, but
It said there was a target of bringing these policies before the board on June 17th, which seems rather quick. And I wouldn't be surprised if one asked for more time to comment. And I don't know what other subcontractors are doing in terms of commenting, but I would suggest that comments are due sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
Whether the 17th is actually met or not, I'm not sure.
Because I believe this is also coming before the RAC. The RAC is going to take a look at this.
there's been a number of iterations of this
Yeah.
presentation, so we're all a little confused. I want to say that there was a sort of a goal to get it to the board of supervisors just because of
Yeah.
the iteration, just get it done. I mean, so this, target date of June 17th was in this published memo that was released for the May 9th meeting. So I would say target getting your comments in before June 17th so that the board of supervisors can consider them if they do take this item at that date.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and close our action items. That was items 9C, and last item is adjournment. All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
See you in a month.